They were expected to arrive in crates. That's what the interstellar broadcasts called them. Unloadable, manageable units of displaced life forms. No names, no histories, just crates of trauma and broken skin. When the first ships landed in Earth's orbit, the rest of the galaxy watched through filtered lenses, waiting to see how humanity would handle the mess. 40,000 war refugees from the shattered moons of Virilia, a species scattered and hunted for daring to rebel against the Ven Dominion. No other planet had taken them. Some had outright denied them entry. A few offered prison worlds or containment satellites. But Earth said one word. Welcome. The word echoed across networks like a virus. It didn't mean much to politicians, but to the hunted, it meant everything. Juno stood on the platform in Nairobi Spaceport, watching the sky fracture open as the third transport ship descended. She wasn't a politician or a soldier. She was a nurse, 34 years old, tired of war stories, tired of seeing children arrive in bags instead of carriers. This wasn't her shift. She'd volunteered like too many others. The arrival wasn't supposed to be public. But Earth's people had shown up anyway. Thousands. Some brought signs. Others brought food. One woman had knitted 200 blankets and sobbed as she passed them out. They were told to expect chaos, disease, panic. Instead, what stepped off the ship barely looked alive. The Virelians weren't tall, weren't threatening. Their bodies were thin from starvation, their eyes dim from what they'd seen. Families huddled together in silence. No screaming. No wailing. Just a silence so deep it burned. And Earth embraced them. The first camp was a lie. It wasn't a camp. It was a district. Repurposed housing, schools reopened, clinics cleaned up, translators patched into street corners. Children were given shoes before they were given registration IDs. Some countries called it madness. The Intergalactic Assembly accused Earth of disrupting immigration law. The Ven Dominion called it an act of open rebellion. The president didn't flinch. Our loyalty, she said on broadcast, is to life, not law. Some humans didn't agree. Protests broke out in the Northern Territories. One man set fire to a transit station blaming alien parasites for his lost job. A senator defected claiming Earth had sold out its future to protect galactic vermin. The news screamed betrayal. But the people on the ground kept working. Juno held a child that first night. The girl couldn't speak, not from lack of language, but because her vocal cords had been damaged by exposure during the flight. They didn't know her name. So they gave her one. Lena. She clung to Juno's neck like it was the only safe place in the universe. And maybe it was. Outside the temporary care facility, cameras rolled. They caught glimpses of human nurses brushing matted silver hair. Volunteers cleaning wounds with shaking hands. One man knelt in front of a young refugee and tied his shoes for him. He smiled. The boy smiled back. That smile, captured and shared across every known system, broke the internet in 4 colonies. The radical welcome spread. More refugees came. Not just Virelians. Others. Survivors from the Malkari purges. Dissenters from the Athleran cleansing. Earth's borders were open, but its patience wasn't infinite. The world bent under the weight of compassion. Resources tightened. Power grids flickered. But something else happened, too. The refugees began to work. Within weeks, some of the older Virelians were helping rebuild the housing districts. One of them, barely 17, repaired a failing water purification system no Earth engineer had been able to fix. A group of former scientists offered new clean energy designs in exchange for nothing. Nothing. Just a chance to stay. Juno watched the district transform. One night, walking home, she passed a school window and saw a human teacher struggling to pronounce a Virelian word. The children laughed together. No hate, no fear, just voices learning each other. But not everyone was laughing. An anonymous message hit Earth's global net the next morning. Shelter them, and you shelter war. It was signed by a faction that had no official name. But Juno remembered the rumors. The quiet purge. The ships that vanished without trace. The sterilization drones. the worlds that disappeared from maps overnight. She didn't sleep that night. Humanity had opened its doors. But now the galaxy had noticed. And not everyone was willing to let that door stay open. 3 days after the warning was broadcast, the mood in Nairobi shifted. What had once felt like the beginning of a miracle now carried the uneasy silence of something waiting to crack. The Virelian district, once a symbol of hope, felt strangely too quiet. Juno could feel it before she could name it, like pressure building behind a locked door. People were still smiling, but their eyes held questions. Volunteers still came, but fewer than before. And the translators? They started censoring certain phrases, glitching over words that felt too political, too violent. Someone, somewhere, was listening. Juno sat with Lena at the clinic that afternoon, slowly helping her work on basic sign language. The girl had healed physically, eating now, even smiling sometimes. But she hadn't spoken a word. Juno didn't push. Some traumas didn't leave scars on the skin. The girl tapped a new sign they had just practiced. Safe. Juno nodded. But her stomach twisted when she did. The president had gone quiet, too. No more public speeches, no more press conferences. Security around all refugee districts doubled overnight. What had been a global act of mercy was slowly starting to feel like an occupation. News reports spoke in circles. Resource strain. Internal disputes. Strategic reassessments. Not one dared say the truth out loud. They were scared. And fear makes humans ugly. On the fourth night, it happened. A riot broke out at Camp 3 near the northern border. Not a protest. A mob. Armed civilians stormed the outer walls chanting slurs not heard on Earth since before the Great Peace Accords. They blamed the food shortage, the power cuts, the job losses. All of it dumped at the feet of people who had barely begun to breathe again. They came with fire and blunt weapons, not caring who they hit. And the soldiers, those stationed there to ensure balance, didn't stop them fast enough. By the time backup arrived, 6 refugees were dead. Dozens more injured. A child was missing. The footage was leaked the next morning. The world went still. Juno watched the video with shaking hands. One of the attackers had live-streamed it like a sport, laughing, celebrating, and in the background, a soldier looking the other way. Not helping. Not protecting. Just standing there. Is this who we are now? The president finally asked in a grim address that evening. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were bloodshot. A galaxy watched us offer kindness. Now they watch us offer violence. The line is drawn. From this day forward, attacks on any refugee will be treated as attacks on humanity itself. The message was clear, but it didn't end there. Because somewhere deep in Earth's orbit, beyond the reach of public channels, a ship drifted in silence. No insignias. No heat signature. And definitely no approval from Earth's Immigration Council. It had been sitting there for nearly 2 weeks, cloaked until it decided to speak. Remove the Virelians, or be removed. That was it. One sentence, transmitted directly to Earth's central diplomatic relay. It bypassed normal filters. No origin data. No timestamp. Just a voice. Cold, metallic, and undeniably alien. The Intergalactic Assembly denied involvement. The Ven Dominion stayed silent. But no one believed this was random. They want a war, said Commander Elena Moretti, head of Earth's Defense Coalition. She was speaking at a closed security briefing, but her words were leaked within hours. They're pushing us to break. They want us to give in to fear, to abandon what makes us human. But Earth had been through worse. Humanity had buried itself in centuries of blood before it ever reached the stars. It had learned slowly and painfully what survival without compassion looked like. That lesson had cost billions. Now it stood at the edge of repeating that cycle. But something had changed. The Virelians weren't just victims anymore. They were adapting. They were teaching, sharing everything they could. One of their survivors, a former war technician named Sev, developed a new cooling matrix that reduced energy consumption in one district by 40%. Another, a quiet girl named Ria, began teaching Earth children how to speak in harmonic tongue, blending Varelian dialects with human rhythms. The children adored it. Schools began asking for more. And then came the day the missing child from Camp 3 was found. Not dead. Alive. Protected by a human woman named Nora Halim, an elderly baker who had once lost her own son in Earth's water wars. She had taken the child in without telling anyone, hidden her during the riot, fed her, protected her. She didn't ask why. She just did it. I didn't see an alien. Nora told the journalists when they found her. I saw a child who needed a place to hide, same as my boy once did. I failed him. I wasn't going to fail her. The story went viral. Earth wept. And something shifted again. Because no matter how much the galaxy whispered threats, no matter how much internal politics twisted, the people, the ordinary people, still cared. But the shadow above Earth remained. That unknown ship finally moved. It sent another message, this time with coordinates, a simple warning. Choose or we will. Commander Moretti dispatched a stealth probe to investigate the source. It didn't return. Earth's orbit detection systems picked up a brief flash, like lightning in space, and then nothing. Juno didn't know any of this, not officially, but the clinic had fewer staff now. Some had quit. Others vanished without a word. And rumors were starting to drip through the walls. That night, Juno found a note taped to the clinic's entrance, in paint, not ink. They die or we burn. She didn't show Lena. She just tore it down and threw it away. But later, in the silence of the empty hallway, she cried. Not for herself. Not even for the Varelians. She cried for what was being lost. The thing humanity had almost found again. And then something happened that no one expected. Lena spoke. Not in sign, not in symbols, not in soft sounds, but real words, barely a whisper, but unmistakable. Don't send me away. Juno froze. The girl was sitting up in the cot, blanket wrapped around her, eyes wide and wet. Her voice was hoarse, cracked. Juno rushed to her, kneeling beside her, touching her cheek. I'm not, she said. I'm not sending you anywhere. The girl's tiny hands clutched her arm. Promise. Juno nodded, even as her throat tightened. I promise. Outside, the storm gathered. But inside that clinic, for just a moment, there was still something stronger than fear. Hope. By the end of the second week after the warning, it was no longer a question of if something would happen, but when. Earth was holding its breath. Not just governments, but entire cities, waiting for either salvation or destruction. The refugee welcome, once seen as Earth's bold act of compassion, was now painted by many as an invitation to war. But war doesn't knock. It sneaks in, finds cracks in walls, whispers through tired minds. And the cracks were starting to show. Cities that had once hosted the Varelians proudly were now dividing into zones. Neighborhoods that didn't allow refugees after dark. Unofficial patrols forming in the name of community security. Flyers that said things like, Earth first. No more feeding strangers while we starve. The president called for calm. The United Nations of Earth passed an emergency resolution reaffirming the right to asylum. But the people outside the capital didn't care about resolutions. They cared about flickering power, empty grocery shelves, late paychecks. Fear doesn't listen to speeches. It listens to its own echo. Juno had started sleeping in the clinic, partly because of the long shifts, mostly because she couldn't face her apartment building anymore. Too many stairs. Too many whispers. Her neighbors, once kind, now closed their doors when she passed. One man spat near her shoes and muttered something about traitors in white coats. She ignored it. She had work to do. Lena was talking now, not much and never loudly, but her words were clear. She never asked about her parents. Juno didn't bring them up. Some losses were too deep for names. The clinic itself was changing, too. More Varelians had started volunteering. One of them, a tall, soft-spoken male with intricate markings on his arms, had once been a field healer during the Ven sieges. His name, or the closest translation, was Tirik. He didn't talk much, but he worked harder than anyone. He fixed 3 of their malfunctioning med pads in an hour. designed a filter that purified water in half the time, and most surprising of all, began teaching human volunteers the basics of Varelian first aid, which used sound frequencies to diagnose tissue damage. Healing with music. Juno said to him once. Tyrek tilted his head. All pain is vibration. We simply listen more closely. That phrase stuck in her head. But not everyone was listening. That week, 2 refugee shelters were burned down in the Northern Hemisphere. No deaths, not yet. But the message was clear. They were being hunted again. And then Earth's skies lit up. Not in war, but protest. Across 12 major cities, millions marched. Not against the Varelians, but for them. Young people, old workers, survivors of Earth's own wars. Signs read, "Refugees built this city." Mercy is not a crime. We don't repeat history. We break it. It was the largest civilian-led movement in Earth's modern history. And in Nairobi, something even more shocking happened. A Varelian child saved a human one. It was in one of the old housing blocks. Faulty wiring caused a fire. And while most evacuated in time, a 5-year-old girl had been trapped in the 3rd-floor apartment. Her mother screamed for help. Guards hesitated, afraid of the structural collapse. Then one of the Varelians sprinted past the barricade. No armor, no hesitation. She returned 3 minutes later with the child in her arms, smoke-blackened and coughing, but alive. Cameras caught the whole thing. And once again, Earth wept. For 24 hours, hope roared back. Donations surged. Volunteers returned. The woman, Ria, the same girl who taught hybrid language at the school, became a symbol of the future Earth could still have. But symbols don't stop bullets. 2 nights later, Ria was shot. Not by military. Not even by police. By a teenager in his father's uniform, who claimed he thought she was a threat. She had been walking home from the school, wearing nothing but a jacket with a flower pin. Juno was the one who treated her. The bullet had missed her spine by centimeters. She lived. Barely. Tyrek didn't leave her side for 12 hours. He sang to her, not songs, but tones, low hums that vibrated through her body. They pulsed in sync with the clinic lights. Juno had never seen anything like it. She didn't interfere. She just kept her hands steady, whispering stats to the monitor. Lena stood at the door the whole time, watching. Quiet. When Ria opened her eyes again, she whispered something in Varelian that made Tyrek cry. He translated for Juno. I forgive him. But forgiveness didn't stop the message. The ship in orbit finally uncloaked. It was larger than anything Earth had ever seen. Black steel, no windows, no lights, a fortress in space. They broadcast a single live transmission to all systems. A being appeared on screen. Human-looking, but not human. Skin like cracked obsidian. Eyes completely white. No pupils. And a voice that hummed like machinery. You were warned. It said, mercy makes you weak. Your protection of the infected threatens galactic balance. You have one rotation, then we cleanse. And the screen went black. People panicked. Stores were looted. Some cities declared martial law. For the first time in over a century, Earth debated whether compassion had been a mistake. But in Nairobi, something else happened. A group of humans and Varelians gathered in the old council chamber. Not government officials, not diplomats, workers, teachers, volunteers, refugees. They sat in a circle. No microphones, no cameras. They didn't ask what the government would do. They asked what they would do. One man stood, a former systems engineer who had lost his brother in the Camp 3 riot. They say mercy is weakness. He said, so what if we show them it's our greatest strength? Not just by saving, but by fighting. The word echoed. Fighting. Not with hate, with unity, with brilliance. And that night, for the first time since the ships had landed, a human and a Varelian co-wrote a battle plan. Not for war. For survival. They called it the Shield Project, a planetary defense initiative using Varelian frequency tech and human electromagnetic field theory. The plan? To build a harmonic barrier strong enough to repel the incoming assault using music, code, and cooperation. It wouldn't be ready in time. But it was a start. And sometimes, the first step is enough to make giants stumble. The day after the black ship uncloaked, Earth woke up differently. The skies didn't look any darker. The streets didn't change overnight. But something in the air had shifted. The way people walked. The way they looked at each other. That old illusion that someone, somewhere would save them was gone. They were on their own. The threat wasn't just political anymore. It was real. A countdown. One planetary rotation. That meant 23 hours, 17 minutes, and 53 seconds from the moment the warning was issued. And then, cleansing. Nobody knew exactly what that meant. But the black ship made no room for interpretation. It wasn't there to negotiate. It had power. It had silence. And it had the certainty of something that had done this before. And Earth had never looked so small. But it wasn't quiet. In Nairobi, inside the repurposed Civic Tower where the Refugee Council had held its underground meeting, Project SHIELD was already underway. It wasn't much to look at. Just a bunch of whiteboards, cables, borrowed tech, half-broken Varelian devices, and terrified people pretending they weren't. But it had one thing the black ship didn't. Hope. Tirik and Juno stood side by side, staring at a field generator that had just sparked out for the third time. The goal was simple. At least in theory. Combine human magnetic shielding with Varelian harmonic frequency control to create a dome of energy that would scramble any focused particle weapon. But it wasn't working. The math was shaky. The generator cores were old. Half the Varelian devices had been scavenged from the escape ships, barely holding together with makeshift welds and prayer. And worse, nobody trusted them. Every few hours, someone from the emergency security forces would show up and ask the same questions. Who's leading this? Who authorized you? Do you really think music is going to save the planet? Juno had stopped answering. Tirik never did. He just kept working, humming low tones under his breath as he calibrated the resonance boards. Elsewhere, protests turned into civil standoffs. Not against the refugees this time, but for them. The planet was split into two halves now. One still believed Earth's mistake was letting the aliens land in the first place. The other believed the only mistake was not standing beside them sooner. And still, the timer kept ticking. 16 hours left. The president issued a global broadcast. She didn't wear a suit. She didn't stand behind a podium. She sat in a plain chair wearing a sweater and a pin on her chest. A white flower. The symbol of the Varelian district. Her message was short. We are not afraid of kindness. We are not ashamed of compassion. And we will not ask for permission to protect the innocent. If they want a war, they'll have to fight all of us. Some called it suicide. Others called it the birth of Earth's new identity. Juno didn't care what they called it. She only cared that the barrier still wasn't working. They tried 8 different combinations. Frequency pairing, dual core overlap, nested magnetic pulses. Nothing held more than 5 seconds. The moment they increased output, the field collapsed into a shriek of broken sound. Lena sat in the corner, headphones on, sketching something with crayons. She hadn't said much since Ria's shooting. Her words were slow again. Her body tense. But she never stopped watching. When the 9th attempt failed, Juno sighed and stepped outside. The city was strangely quiet for an afternoon. Drones hovered above in silent patrol, and even the birds seemed to be waiting. She didn't cry. Not yet. But her hands trembled. It wasn't just fear. It was failure. I'm a nurse. She whispered to herself. What am I doing here? Leading. A voice answered. It was Tirik. He stood at the doorway. His hands stained with energy dye from the last circuit repair. You care more than anyone here. He said. That is leadership. Juno laughed bitterly. We're trying to stop a planet killer with used speakers and goodwill. That's not leadership. That's desperation. Tyrek tilted his head. Sometimes, they are the same. Inside, Lena stood up. She looked towards them, but didn't speak. Instead, she walked to the table, picked up a frequency tuner, and pressed a button. A low note filled the room. Gentle, almost like wind through a tunnel. She tapped the board again. A second tone joined it, slightly higher. Tyrek turned slowly. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. Lena shrugged, then pointed at her headphones. Juno frowned. "What are you listening to, sweetheart?" Lena walked over and handed her the headphones. Juno put them on. It wasn't music, not exactly. It was a recording of the clinic. Lena had recorded the room day after day. The hum of machines, Tyrek's healing songs, Juno's voice, even the low whir of the field generator. It wasn't just noise. It was a pattern. Tyrek took the headphones next. His eyes widened. "She's been building a resonance map," he said slowly. "Not just random sounds. This is stability." The tones weren't collapsing because the math was wrong. They were collapsing because the inputs were too clean. What Earth scientists missed, Lena had caught through instinct. The field didn't need to be perfect. It needed to be human, with flaws, with emotion, with rhythm. Something the enemy wouldn't recognize because it wasn't part of any calculation. "Get me the amplifier," Tyrek said, moving quickly now. They rewired the system. Fed Lena's recordings through the frequency converter. Layered the raw emotional vibrations with the pulse generator. When they flipped the switch, the barrier didn't flicker. It sang. A low harmonic wave spread across the building. It wasn't a hum. It was a feeling. A vibration in the bones. Peaceful, strong, alive. And it held. 10 seconds. 20. A full minute. Juno laughed out loud, her voice breaking. Tyrek stared in awe. "It's alive," he whispered. "It's not a shield. It's a soul." News spread fast. 7 hours left on the clock. And Earth finally had something to believe in. Teams all over the world scrambled to replicate the setup. Juno and Tyrek sent out blueprints, messy handwritten notes, no encryption, no licensing. Anyone could build it. And they did. Not perfectly. Not consistently. But it was enough. Even the Defense Coalition called in, humbling themselves, asking for guidance. For once, the refugees led the way. As dawn approached and the final countdown neared, hundreds of small resonance barriers were flickering across the globe. Not citywide domes, not impenetrable force fields, just pockets of defiance, oceanside clinics, rooftop schools, underground shelters, all of them humming, all of them refusing to be afraid. The black ship made no response, no warnings, no further messages, just silence. Until the timer hit 0. The final second passed. No sound, no tremor, no explosion, just the clock on every screen around the world blinking. 00. Juno stared at it. The numbers etched in red on the corner of the broadcast wall in the command room. Everyone stood still. Even Tyrek held his breath. For a few seconds, hope held its breath, too. Then, the sky screamed. Not with thunder, not with the roar of jets, but with a silence so sharp it pressed into the skull like a knife. All over Earth, people clutched their heads as the silence vibrated straight through their bones. Dogs howled, children cried, electronics flickered. The black ship had spoken again. Not in words, but in presence. This was the cleansing. Above Nairobi, clouds began to churn unnaturally, pulled into a vortex of dark blue and silver. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in 2 minutes. Drones failed midair and plummeted to the ground. Earth's satellites went blind. Juno ran to the upper level of the clinic, where Lena had already curled into a corner. The girl was trembling, hands over her ears as if trying to block out something no one else could hear. Tyrek arrived seconds later, carrying the portable frequency tuner. He sat beside her and began to hum. Not to calm her, but to stabilize her. The pitch of his voice shifted slowly, matching the pressure in the room, fighting back against the force pressing in from above. Then came the first beam. It hit a city in South America, Caracas. A single streak of red light sliced from the sky and hit the ground with surgical precision. There was no sound. No shockwave, just light. And then nothing. The city didn't explode, it disappeared. One moment millions of people, the next a crater of glass, a hole in the earth where life had been, just gone. The world screamed. Panic rippled across nations. Military forces scrambled to launch countermeasures, but nothing touched the black ship. Missiles dissolved mid-air. Energy weapons ricocheted back at their sources. Earth's defense systems were toys before a god. 3 more beams followed in rapid succession. Paris, Mumbai, Osaka. 4 cities, 4 warnings. That's all it was to them. Tyreek stood slowly. They are not killing us, he said. They are testing. Juno looked up. Testing what? Our will. Her hands clenched in the tower. The resonance barrier still hummed, the only technology the enemy hadn't reacted to. Yet. Outside, groups of civilians poured into safe zones powered by the SHIELD project. Dozens of them, now scattered across the world, were all humming in sync, built with Lena's patterns and Tyreek's frequency formulas. The black ship paused. No more beams. No more silence. And then, in the sky, a rift opened. It wasn't a portal. Not exactly. It looked like space itself had been torn open. Inside it more ships appeared, smaller, sleeker, a fleet, thousands of them. They're going to finish it, Tyreek said quietly. They will erase Earth completely. The fleet is not for intimidation. Juno looked down at Lena, who had stopped shaking. Her eyes were wide, but calm. Then we finish it first, she whispered. What? She walked to the amplifier and turned the dial. If they want our soul, she said, let's give it to them loud enough to choke on it. In cities across Earth, the SHIELD project began to pulse louder. Each hub, each barrier, started syncing not just their frequencies, but their timing. Engineers, musicians, hackers, doctors, refugees, and ordinary people linked devices together, creating harmonic chains across districts. Earth's first planetary defense network wasn't made by armies. It was made by volunteers. The black ship moved. For the first time since its arrival, it lowered. Slowly, descending like judgment, its shadow swallowing entire provinces. People stood on rooftops, waiting. Some cried, some prayed, some sang. Then came the first attack. Dozens of ships broke from the fleet and dived toward the surface. They weren't bombers. They didn't fire weapons. They deployed drones, black needle-shaped machines that emitted high-pitched sonic waves meant to disable, confuse, and disarm. But when the drones reached the cities protected by the resonance domes, they cracked. Not the domes, the drones. Their internal systems shorted out. Some exploded in midair, others fell like rocks, twitching and sparking. The resonance fields didn't just block them, they repelled them. The hum was no longer just a barrier. It had become a weapon. Juno watched in disbelief from the Nairobi tower. They didn't account for emotional frequency, Tyreek said, voice trembling. They calculated science, not soul. One of the control screens pinged. It was a live feed from Osaka. Ground Zero. A child had survived. A Viridian child. She had been pulled from the rubble of a nearby hospital, covered in ash, and shielded by one of the newly built resonance generators just installed hours before the beam hit. Her first words. Thank you. That single clip was uploaded online. Within minutes, it had been rebroadcast across every feed, every station, every language. And then, something unimaginable happened. The black ship paused mid-descent. The fleet held position. Then came a new message. Not a threat, a voice, still cold, still alien, but different. What are you? It asked. The question wasn't rhetorical, it was real. They didn't understand. They didn't understand why humans were still standing, why children were still singing, why people who had no reason to fight, who should have been consumed by fear, chose instead to unite. Tyreek stood beside the control panel, placed his hand on the transmitter. He answered. "We are what you were too afraid to become." Silence. For 10 seconds, the black ship hovered. Then it ascended. No beam, no retaliation, no final strike. It rose and the fleet followed. Within 10 minutes, the sky was clear. The rift closed. The stars returned. Earth didn't cheer. Not right away. People didn't know what to feel. Relief and grief shared the same seat. For cities were gone, millions lost, but billions saved. In Nairobi, Juno stepped outside and looked up. No noise, no ship, just clouds. And beside her, Lena whispered, "We're still here." The black ship vanished just before sunrise. One blink and it was gone. As if the sky had never been torn open, as if 4 cities hadn't been wiped from the earth like pencil marks. But the silence it left behind wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. And it was everywhere. Juno stood in front of the clinic, her arms wrapped tightly across her chest, staring at the horizon. The sky looked normal. Blue, scattered clouds, soft winds. Nairobi hadn't been touched by the attack. Most of the world hadn't. And yet it felt like the entire planet had aged 10 years in a single day. Lena stood beside her. The girl didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The way she held Juno's hand, tight, like she was scared the world might vanish, too, was enough. Inside the clinic, Tirik and the other volunteers were already beginning triage rounds. Not physical wounds this time, psychological ones. Fear, shock, survivor's guilt. The entire Viridian district had gone quiet since the retreat. They hadn't celebrated. They hadn't even asked what had happened. They knew better than anyone what survival really meant. And what it cost. That morning, Earth held a memorial. Not just for the cities that had been lost, Caracas, Paris, Mumbai, Osaka, but for the idea of safety that had died with them. The president spoke from a quiet balcony, not a stage. She wore black. No script, just a folded piece of paper and a shaking voice. "We did what no other planet dared to do. We opened our arms. And they made us bleed for it, but we are still standing, and we will keep standing, because this is who we are now." People didn't clap, they just cried. Across the world, citizens lit candles in windows. Some sang, others just sat in silence. There was no coordinated movement, no trending tag, no hashtag to unify the moment. Just billions of people grieving together in the quiet way humans always do when they don't know what else to be. Juno returned to her quarters that night and found an envelope taped to her door. No sender. Just her name. Inside was a letter. "You saved them. You saved all of us. They were right to fear you, because you remind the universe what being human truly means." No signature, just a small Viridian symbol drawn at the bottom. She didn't need to know who sent it. She knew. But outside that hope, something darker was already brewing. The news started changing tone by day 3. Less about the miracle of survival, more about resource strain, international resentment, and the Viridian problem. Some networks claimed Earth had only become a target because of the refugees. That 4 cities were gone because of one decision, letting them in. It didn't take long for the word blame to surface. Not openly, not in government speeches, but in whispers. They should leave now. We gave them sanctuary. They brought war. This is not our burden to carry. Juno heard it in the hospital corridors, in market lines, even among colleagues who had once worked beside her without question. It wasn't loud, not like before. It was softer now, meaner, cowardly. It's time to put Earth first again. She tried to ignore it. She tried to focus on her work, on Lena's recovery, on Tirik's efforts to help rebuild, but it grew harder each day. 2 refugee shelters were vandalized by day 5. Graffiti scrawled across the walls in red paint. "We suffered for you." How many more cities? Ria, the girl who had once saved a human child from a fire, was denied service at a local supply depot. They said it was policy. No Viridians without escort. She didn't argue. She just walked away. And Juno realized this was no longer fear. It was jealousy. Humans were looking at the Viridians, seeing how they'd contributed to the survival effort, and feeling inadequate, displaced. It didn't matter that Earth had stood together. In the aftermath, unity always breaks first. And still, there were pockets of hope. The SHIELD project wasn't dismantled. In fact, it was expanded. Not into weapons, but into infrastructure. Cities began incorporating the harmonic resonance tech into their buildings, schools, even transportation hubs. People wanted to be safe, not just from alien threats, but from each other. For the first time, Viridian designs were being taught in human universities. Mixed classrooms began forming. Human and Viridian children learning side by side. Lena was the first to enroll. She didn't say goodbye when she left the clinic for her first day. She just gave Juno a long hug, then slipped a small bracelet onto her wrist. It hummed softly when worn. A personal resonance field. Not enough to shield a building, but enough to remember. A month passed, then two. The skies stayed clear. The fleet never returned. But politics did. Nations began renegotiating Earth's place in the intergalactic assembly. Some demanded tighter immigration rules. Others wanted Viridian territories placed under surveillance. Trade deals were restructured. One Earth colony even closed its borders entirely, citing cultural contamination. The president resisted. But her opposition grew louder. And in the shadows, something else began to stir. Intelligence reports revealed a network forming within Earth's defense systems. A group of high-ranking officials, ex-military leaders, and politicians. They called themselves restorers. Their message was simple. Survival was luck. Next time we'll be ready without the burden of weakness. They didn't mention refugees by name, but their targets were clear. Tyrek found out about them before anyone else. His connections in off-world diplomacy passed him a warning. The restorers weren't just a fringe group. They were planning something bigger, something that could undo everything Earth had just fought for. And they had powerful backers, unknown ones. They want a purge, Tyrek said one night, his voice tight. Another cleansing. Juno whispered. He nodded. But from the inside this time. She stared at him, heart pounding. Then we can't just survive, she said. We have to lead. And that night, they made a new plan, not to build shields, but to build bridges. A global initiative, one that would send human and Viridian ambassadors across the stars, spreading the story of what happened. Not as victims, not as survivors, but as partners. They called it the Harmonic Accord. It wouldn't be accepted easily. There would be resistance, sabotage, lies. But it would carry one truth across the galaxy. Earth stood when others bowed. Earth embraced when others turned away. Earth became the first planet to defy extinction with compassion. And if that made them a threat, so be it. The first attack didn't look like an attack at all. It came as a system update, a routine patch to the Nairobi SHIELD Hub's operating network. Nothing suspicious, signed off by Earth Central Infrastructure Council. The engineers installed it without hesitation. They'd done it a dozen times since the harmonic barriers had gone up. But 20 minutes after the update, the entire dome flickered. Not failed, not shut down, just flickered. Like a breath being held, then released. So brief that no alarms went off. So subtle that only a few noticed. But Tyrek noticed. He'd been recalibrating the frequency modulators when the readings dipped. His hands froze on the controls. The numbers weren't wrong. They were wrong on purpose. A built-in fault. A backdoor. He didn't speak immediately. He ran the scan again, and again. The pattern repeated. Every 32 minutes, a 3-second vulnerability opened. A gap in the harmonic field that could allow scanning, signal interception, or something worse. Sabotage. He called Juno instantly. She didn't answer on the first ring. She was busy fitting a child with a field band at the clinic. A small boy with burn scars on his hands from the Caracas event. When she finally saw the call and stepped away, Tyrek's voice was calm, but cold. Turn off the Nairobi barrier, now. She blinked. What? They've compromised it. If we leave it on, we're broadcasting our failure every half hour. It's a signal flare. Someone is watching. Her stomach turned. Not aliens, not ships. Humans. The restorers. She shut the barrier down manually. The moment she did, a message pinged across the engineering terminal. Unexpected shutdown. Protocol breach. Council notification sent. The words turned to ash in her mouth. This was planned. Earth's own infrastructure had been rigged. Not by enemies in the sky, but by officials who wore Earth's flag and smiled for cameras. The restorers had their hands inside the very system that had saved the planet. And they weren't planning to save it again. They were preparing to own what came next. That same day, a series of explosions struck 3 other SHIELD hubs: Berlin, Jakarta, and Rio. Not military bases, not Viridian districts, human-only safe zones, places that had supported integration, taught shared classes, run joint programs. The attackers left no messages, no names. But the aftermath spoke clearly. No more unity. The news couldn't ignore it this time. Earth's media split again. Some called it domestic terrorism, others called it a natural reaction to the refugee crisis. One channel ran a full segment called, "Are We Safer Divided?" Tyreek didn't sleep that night. Juno barely did, either. Lena, sensing the tension, stopped speaking again. She clung to her small resonance bracelet like it was a lifeline. They all knew what was coming. Not another alien cleansing. An internal war. The president finally addressed the planet the next morning, her face pale and bruised with exhaustion. No teleprompter. No makeup. There are those among us who believe Earth would be stronger if it stood alone. They believe unity is weakness. They are wrong. And if we do not stop them now, we will lose everything we fought for. She declared a global investigation into internal sabotage. She ordered a lockdown of all SHIELD hub controls until security sweeps were completed. But it was too late. The restorers made their move that night. A military convoy disguised as a routine transport rolled into the Nairobi district after curfew. No sirens, no drones, just silence and motion. Inside the clinic, Juno was reviewing patient logs when the lights flickered. Tyreek stepped out of the generator room, eyes wide. They are here. How many? 3 trucks, armored, too many weapons for peacekeeping. Her throat tightened. She glanced at Lena, who had already grabbed her small emergency bag, one she kept ready for evacuation drills. Smart girl. Tyreek didn't wait. He ran to the lower vault, the place where they'd hidden copies of the harmonic schematics. They had to be protected. If the restorers got their hands on them, the very tech that saved Earth could be used to subjugate it. Juno grabbed a compad and called emergency support. Blocked. Signal jammed. They were cut off. The sound of boots echoed outside, heavy, disciplined, deliberate. Not a raid, a sweep. They weren't here to arrest anyone. They were here to make an example. A bang on the door. Open. This is Central Order compliance. Juno didn't move. She looked at Lena. Go with Tyreek. Now. Get to the East Tunnel. Lena shook her head, her eyes filled with fear. But Juno raised her voice. Now. That's an order, Lena. The girl ran. Seconds later, the clinic door burst open. 5 soldiers in full combat gear. No names, no insignias. Juno raised her hands. I'm unarmed. This is a medical zone. One stepped forward. We're securing dangerous technology. You're attacking children. No. We're preventing future casualties. She recognized his voice. Officer Brandt. Former Earth Coalition. Once served as a peacekeeper during the first landings. He'd come to the clinic once, smiling, asking questions, pretending to care. Now he pointed a weapon at her. Where are the backups? I don't know. Wrong answer. The rifle charged, and then the lights exploded. Not from bullets, from sound. A harmonic pulse rang through the walls, Tyreek's final fail-safe. He designed it for emergencies, to short out energy weapons and stun hostile units. It worked. The soldiers dropped one after another, as if yanked by invisible hands. Juno moved fast, stepping over one to grab their compad. She found what she needed. Coordinates, a planned purge, 6 more Viridian zones marked for raids within 48 hours. They weren't stopping in Nairobi, they were starting here. She ran down the stairs, into the east tunnel. She found Tyreek waiting, breathing hard, blood on his arm. Lena clung to his leg, wide-eyed. "We need to broadcast this," Juno said, holding up the pad. "Encrypted?" "Yes." He nodded. "There's only one place left with a clean satellite uplink." "Where?" He looked up. Spaceport 6. The first port to welcome Viridians, the last one still standing. Spaceport 6 wasn't just another station. It was the first place on Earth where a Viridian had ever stepped onto human soil and been greeted with a smile instead of a weapon. And now, it was the last hope. Juno, Tyreek, and Lena moved quickly through the old underground tunnels, long-abandoned evacuation routes from the first wave of Earth's alien collaborations. Their steps echoed off metal walls. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was hunted. They had one goal: reach the communications tower and broadcast the Restorers' purge plans to the world. They didn't know who would listen. They only knew someone had to. Behind them, Nairobi was in chaos. The Restorers had lost the clinic raid, but that only hardened their grip. Martial law was declared across half the continent within hours. News stations were under emergency review. District leaders disappeared overnight. And in cities where Viridians had once walked freely, they now stayed behind locked doors. Some were already being rounded up. Juno had seen the signs before. Not in space. In Earth's own history books, when fear becomes law, compassion becomes a crime. They weren't going to let that happen again. The tunnel led out behind the old terminal grounds, near a chain-linked fence lined with dust and silence. The air smelled of oil and dry metal. Spaceport 6 hadn't been fully operational in months, but parts of it still functioned, namely, the uplink tower. And thanks to Tyreek's frequency encryption system, the Restorers wouldn't be able to jam it. "Lena stays with me," Tyreek said as they approached the tower. "We'll monitor the transmission from below. You'll need a clear uplink path." Juno nodded. Her chest was tight, but her steps were firm. The tower loomed above them, its structure skeletal but intact. Metal stairs wound upward around a central core. At the top, a manual console that could override any auto-blocks and send a direct stream to Earth's global net. She climbed. Each step rang out louder than the last. She didn't stop. Not when her legs burned. Not when her throat tightened. When she reached the top, the view nearly took her breath away. The world stretched out in all directions, painted in deep orange by a dying sun. For a second, she could almost pretend it was over. That this moment was the ending the world deserved. But then she saw the drones. 2 of them. Government class. Painted with Earth Coalition symbols. But they weren't monitoring. They were tracking. They'd been found. Juno dropped to the console, fingers flying across the panel. She uploaded the coordinates Tyreek had pulled from the stolen pad, the names of every district, every official tied to the plan. Her hands shook, but she didn't stop. The drones circled closer. Down below, Tyreek was working furiously at the signal amplifier. He could see the charge building on the drone's wings, attack mode. There was no time. "Just a few more seconds," he whispered. Juno finished the upload and hit transmit. The tower blinked. The uplink pinged the global net. And then the screen went black. She froze. No. 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 But then another screen lit up. Broadcast active. Not just on Earth, on every connected outpost, every station, every colony still operating within Earth's grid. And the feed wasn't just data. It was her. The tower had automatically activated the microphone and camera. She hadn't meant to be seen, but now she was. The entire planet was looking at her face. Juno inhaled deeply. Her voice trembled at first, but she didn't stop. "This is Dr. Juno Sori. You've seen what they've done. You've watched your cities burn. You've buried your children. And now, while you mourn, they're turning you against each other. The restorers are not here to save Earth. They are here to reset it, to erase every step we've taken towards something better. They say we survived because of luck, that compassion was weakness, but we know better. We survived because we stood together, because we welcomed the broken, because we believed in more than just survival. And now they want us to forget. Don't. Don't let them rewrite this world. Don't let fear win. Because this time, if we fall, it won't be aliens that destroy us. It will be us. The video feed ended, but the words didn't. Within an hour, her message had been downloaded in 92 countries, rebroadcast on off-world stations, translated into 20 languages, and mirrored across every underground network. The public outcry was instant. Protests erupted across restored cities. Restorer safe zones were blockaded. Governors who had supported the movement were ousted by emergency elections. Military units began to defect, refusing to follow purge orders. And then, something happened no one expected. The Intergalactic Assembly contacted Earth. They had stayed silent throughout the cleansing crisis, silent while the world burned, while ships hovered, while cities vanished. But Juno's message had reached them, and they responded. Not with punishment, with recognition. Earth has proven it is not merely a survivor. It is a planet that changes others by refusing to be changed by fear. The Assembly hereby acknowledges Earth as a Level 1 cultural sovereign entity, with autonomous rights to refugee integration, harmonic tech development, and planetary defense structures. Your compassion has earned you more than survival. It has earned you respect. That same week, Earth forces disbanded the Restorer movement. Several leaders went into hiding, but most didn't run, because people had stopped listening. Juno returned to Nairobi 2 days later. The clinic had been cleaned up, the windows repaired. Lena was already back in class, teaching other children how to build their own resonance bracelets. Ria had returned, too. Her shoulder still weak, but her spirit stronger than ever. Turek stayed. He was offered off-world sanctuary, but he refused. "This is my home," he said simply. "Where else would I go?" The harmonic fields remained, refined, restructured, and turned into symbols, not shields. Not barriers to keep others out, signals to let them know someone would always open the door. Juno didn't go back to medicine, not right away. Instead, she helped found the Earth Viridian Accord Network, a civilian-led alliance dedicated to teaching other systems how to welcome, protect, and build together. Not everyone agreed with it, but fewer and fewer dared to fight it. The black ship never returned. Some believed it was still watching, waiting. But Earth didn't wait anymore. It moved forward, not perfectly, not painlessly, but bravely. 1 year later, Juno stood once again at Spaceport 6, now fully restored. Lena stood beside her, a translator badge pinned to her chest. A new ship approached, not a warship, a transport, filled with another wave of survivors.